Hey, everybody, come back over here. It's never easy to get full stackers to come to lecture. All right. All right, everyone. Hey, Nate Epstein. Come back. Help people get back over here. All right. Okay, everyone. I know we get asked a lot. What's it like to work at different types of companies? And so tonight, I'm really happy to have our first company types panel. And this is with people who are trying to select a different variety of companies and then you can kind of ask them questions about what's it like to work there, what are some challenges, what are some pros and cons. And I'll let each one of them introduce kind of themselves, talk a little about their company and the team that they're currently working on.
Hello. I'm Colin. I work at Dropbox. I'm on the content and workflow team. So basically, we own Dropbox.com, and we work on that site.
I'm Jenna. I work at Cargo. It's an ad tech company. So we do almost all mobile and tablet ads. And I'm working on the front-end team on a couple different projects.
Hi, everybody. Hello, everybody. I'm Ash. I work at Adobe. I am the technical evangelist for Creative SDK. The Creative SDK is software that you can build into your iOS, Android, or web app that will significantly speed up your process of creating an app that is made for creatives.
Hi, I'm Linda. I work at FireEye. I've been there about 6 months, and I work on the back-end team. We work on a project called the Threat Analytics platform. So we do cloud-based, real-time analytics on your getting hacked and everything. So security.
All right, great. So I'll have to start with maybe we can go by company size, which is hard for me to guess. Maybe we'll start with you, Ash. What size is your team, and what has been the most fun part about working that team?
Yeah, sure. So the company itself, I mean, I looked on LinkedIn, is like well over 10,000 people. I think it stops counting at 10,000, so I'm not sure. I mean, my team was actually formerly a startup that got acquired by Adobe about 12 months ago called Aviary. So if you've ever used the Aviary image editor on iOS or Android, then that's the team I'm working on. We all actually just moved into an office together with the Behance team. So Behance is another startup that Adobe acquired. And there's one other called Media Optimizer. So the Aviary team itself is somewhere around 30 to 35 people. And then I'm on the go-to-market team, which basically takes our technology, our SDK or APIs, and helps developers learn about them. So there are 3 people on that team who are technical, myself included, and then 3 people who are marketing or partner relationships or that sort of thing.
I think I'm next. Dropbox is about 14 to 1,600 people. The office in New York is we just broke 50, which is exciting. My team is 8 engineers, and then we have a design team and product. And then, so yeah, we're about 8 engineers. It's a pretty manageable size. It's pretty great, because then we still have a lot of support and a lot of, obviously other teams and engineers. So if you have questions about how some library works, there's always someone to ask. But like for day to day, it still moves pretty quickly just because our team is pretty manageable.
Yeah, FireEye has, we just hit 3,000 employees, so we have 3,000, but the office, yeah. The office here is, the company I work for used to be Mandiant, and so there was about 70 employees here, so that's about the size of the office here. The group that I work in, back-end team, well, our team is about, well, it was 9, now we have 10. They just hired another Fullstack employee, Fullstack alumni. And I guess that's about it. So it's So they kind of break it down into smaller teams. So.
I guess I'm representing like the Silicon Alley companies. My company, I think, has about 150 employees. The engineering team, it's growing really fast, which is obviously part of working at a startup type company. When I started in January, I was the 12th person on the engineering team. And now we have 25, and we're looking for some others. So it's growing really fast. I think that's been one of the funnest things about working there. Probably around May, I started in January, so yeah, May, they decided to switch from a kind of back-end heavy LAMP stack to actually start using AngularJS on the front end. So we got new designs and have completely rebuilt our front end using Angular. So there's been opportunities to both support the super experienced people on my team and also to build some new things myself. So it's been a really nice balance.
All right, that's really cool. It's a great spread of companies. I'm curious, I think we have some things that we believe about big companies, but what are some of the things that surprised you about the company that you went to work for based on that you wouldn't have guessed from the interview that you did? Like, what are the things like, maybe it's, you're going to work for a company that's 10,000 people, something that surprised you. But, we can start with you at Cargo.
Give me a minute.
All right, well, someone wants to start. What was something that surprised you about working at the company based on the size that it was?
I assumed that, like with a larger company, I guess in my head, that, like you would work with a team and you're going to work on a very small aspect of some project. And I've been surprised that, like, pretty much it seems like at any size, there's always just a lot of work to do. And at my company, that you do end up getting a lot of ownership over an entire project. So you get to see it from beginning all the way to end, and then like even when the bug fixes are coming in, like you're in charge of them. And it's not like there's not like a big team where you're only focusing on like a very small aspect. You get to kind of own a lot of the code, which is pretty nice.
I think one thing that surprised me is just the level of flexibility and ability to grow into different roles. Obviously, that's one thing that a lot of people like about working in a fairly startup type company. But several people at my work have like learned a new language or just decided they wanted to switch from front end to back end or vice versa. And so that's been one of the really great flexibilities of working at a company of that size.
Hello. Okay. Blue is unmuted. So, being the role that I am, I'm working in a huge company, obviously, but at the same time, it's a little different. So I'm almost kind of like the first user of our technology in a way. So it's kind of nice. There's a lot of self-directed kind of like, I want to try to build this app. Let's see if it's possible with our technology and then write about it, which is nice. There's also the aspect of when we have to get a release done or something like that, there's so many moving parts and so many teams that say, like today, for example, in the morning I'm talking to people in India before they go to bed. And then we're talking, once people in San Francisco finally wake up, we're talking to them about coordinating something, so then we can send all this stuff over to Romania, where they're going to launch it on our Angular website. So all of these things, like pulling them together, I've never worked at a huge company, but it turns out that I find these kind of human problems pretty fascinating too, so it's been pretty cool. At the same time, it could be quite different if you're a full-time engineer there, so that's kind of been my experience so far with what I'm doing with evangelism.
And I'm kind of in like a medium-sized company, I guess, from the rest here. And I found it interesting that whatever project you're working on, they do like a monthly reveal. So basically, you get on a call and show what you've been working on. And so it gives you a time to see what other people are working on, and you get to meet other different engineers. And it's kind of neat to see what other people are working on and to get a chance to shine and show your work also.
Oh, great. I mean, I have a lot of questions here, but I'd love to take questions from the audience about anything you're curious about working at different types of companies and different sizes. All right. Mr. Farrell. And I'll repeat the question.
So how long did
All right, this is a great question from Mr. Jimmy Farrell. How long until you felt like you were going to take the production environment down? I mean, until you felt comfortable in your role.
Maybe a little background on like where you started out.
Say it again?
A little background on where you started out, like.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be great.
All right, I'll start. Okay, so I think that we as full stack students can kind of split into two groups. I think there's a group of people that are like, oh yeah, I went to full stack and I would have been fine without it because I already knew a lot of technical things and blah, blah, blah. And then I think there's a second group that is like, wow, like full on career change. I don't know anything. I'm just gonna kind of jump in and get my feet wet and hopefully kind of swim and not sink. And I was definitely in the latter group of those two. So I think starting out at my company probably took me maybe 3 or 4 months before I felt like I was really contributing to the team. He's laughing.
He started last week, so that's why I was asking.
Yeah, until like May or June, I was like a pink slip any day now. But if you get on a team where you're working with really great people, they understand that process and the kind of like drowning feeling, and they, give you time and support you through that.
So I went in, and one of the first things I was tasked with was not the web SDK, but the Android SDK, like getting some of that stuff in shape. And suddenly it was like, oh my God, Java and Android APIs and all this, and trying to like pull all that stuff together. And I'd had some preparation beforehand because I knew kind of a couple of months before I'd probably be working there. At the same time, there were these moments, probably a couple of weeks in, where things weren't working in this app I was building. And I started asking questions, and it turned out that I was starting to discover some bugs. This blew my mind, because there was no way that it was supposed to not, I just automatically assumed this was always going to be my problem. One of the cool things that I found this whole process has been that Fullstack really teaches us how to learn this stuff. I think that that's probably been made known throughout, in some of the classes before when you're juniors, they're like, we're teaching you how to learn. But it's really true. Like, any of us could go out there and do that. One other aspect of this whole how long does it take you to feel comfortable thing, especially with technical evangelism, it seems to be that I talked to somebody the other day that said, basically with this kind of job, you can stand on stage like I'm doing now, I guess, and have this sort of imposter syndrome for 2 different types of jobs at once. So not only the technical aspect, but also you're standing up and being a product person as well, right? And so suddenly you've got one foot in both sides, and that's obviously going to take a while, because the person that said that's been doing this for a year or 2 at least. So
I broke the site after in my second week, and got a lot of very angry emails from the daily push team. And at first, I freaked out. I was like, "Oh God, it was fun to work here for 2 weeks." But then, basically, realized after that it's actually fairly common that I don't know, if you're not breaking something, then you're not pushing yourself, I guess. Right. So I think that was actually really helpful in understanding and kind of removing a lot of stress of better not break anything, because I did. And but then by week 6, I had to we brought a feature to GA, or to the general public, and got lots of emails from people being like, something's broken, and realizing that that's kind of just not, it's just that's okay, that you should try to push production code, but then also, and then be responsible enough that you're gonna fix everything. And so I think because I broke it so early, that it was helpful to kind of become more comfortable and lose that whole feeling of I don't belong here.
Yeah, I had about the same time frame. I was going to say 2 to 3 months. So the first 2 months, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I have this job. This is awesome. And then I was, then after you kind of work on a feature and you really do something that feels like you actually did something. So I think that was like the 3-month part that I'm like, hey, wow, I'm part of the team and I did something useful and it was good. So, and now I feel like comfortable. So now I've been there 6 months and I feel totally good. So.
Let's go, how about Drew? And then, dude.
So, in your experience so far, how important is your connection to the product that you're working on compared to just the work environment and things you're doing?
All right, this is a great question. How important is it that you feel connected to the product itself versus the environment that you're in?
So our office is really, I don't know, I think it's unique in that like our engineers, we sit like completely integrated with our sales team. And so every day I'm like overhearing someone try to sell Dropbox, and at the same time I'm hearing all the problems that their users have with our features. And so because of that, like they're very comfortable just turning around and saying like, why doesn't this work? And like, I'm like
Because of you, Colin.
Yeah, because I broke it at week 2. But I think it's like because of that, like I actually it's really helpful because then like when it's really easy to just like think that the way how I work is how everyone works, and so everything works for me, and if like I have a really good workflow, but like being really connected to like how our users actually use like how the users actually use our application is incredibly helpful, because then now you can kind of better understand like what they want, which definitely helps you create a better product. So I think it's really important.
Anyone else want to answer, or we can take more questions? All right, let's take a question from, I think Nathan had his hand up, and then we'll go to Mr. Nierenberg. So the question is, how would you improve the onboarding process at your company if you had a chance to improve it? Is that fair, Nathan? Onboarding or any process. Yeah, or any process.
How long do you have? I think most people that work for a company with probably less than 200 or 300 people experience the fact that there's tons of change and there's a lot of things that aren't in place yet, that processes that they're still figuring out the best way to do it. In my case, there was not an onboarding. I kind of came in, filled out some papers, and then sat down at my computer and stared at this giant Sublime text code file bundle. I think one thing that would have been super useful is some documentation. So we're just now building documentation on our products, and they've been around, some of them for 5 years. So it's definitely time for that. And yeah, we'll retire them before we get documentation. And another thing is I've been working on building a map of some of our Angular stuff to show how all the directives depend on each other, just to make sure we don't get any kind of interdependency issues or like circular logic. So that's another thing trying to build. And then another thing I've actually helped implement in my company is we give all of our new hires now a library of really useful links. And it links to company stuff, but also to all these great like debugging sites and that kind of thing. So we're getting there.
Yeah, our company had a pretty good onboarding kind of thing, but there were some onboarding like resources that everyone just assumed that somebody else told me. So it was just, they didn't really have a great thing. So I'm there like, a month or so, and someone else asks me a question. I find out, I'm like, oh, I wish I would have known this was here. And no one, they're like, you didn't know? Like, we didn't know you didn't know. So they kind of have some great resources, but they didn't have like a central location to say, here's all the resources, which actually now they just started putting in place. So I think if anybody was trying to do an onboarding thing, to have a central resource to where a new hire can go to get the different links or different things would be helpful, because then there's like a one-stop shop of where you can find it, instead of being like there's a piece over here for engineering, a piece over here for HR, a piece of, that you're just trying to hunt and peck the whole site to find something.
Zeke. The question is, Zeke is curious what code review is like, and if you are either doing code review as a reviewee or as a reviewer.
We code review everything. Like you don't, if you put up a PR, someone else has to look at it. There's two other people on our team that reviews everything. So, I mean, even if you put in one line of code, it's code reviewed. So basically, it's that's definitely in everything. Every single thing is tested. So it's fully tested and fully code reviewed. So which is kind of good, because then you get like instant feedback of how you can make something better, and you don't have any kind of thing of saying like, oh my goodness, I wonder how this is going to go, because literally every day when you're doing something, all your code is being looked at by the rest of the team. So.
Yeah, like everything we do has to get code reviewed. We have something where, if I touch code and then someone else wants to touch code later, I will immediately get flagged. So then like I will at least like know that someone's changing something that I wrote, or like around what I wrote, which is interesting, because then it like at times is annoying, because like sometimes I just want to get a push out really quickly, but then it's also really like, again, code reviews I think is like a really great way to learn, just because like I will try to do something, and then suddenly like the security team is coming in and like giving suggestions as to how something might change, and you can learn from a lot of different teams that way, instead of just like learning just from your own team. It's a really good way to kind of learn from everyone.
One other thing we have is we have a Git hook that prevents you from committing anything until all of the unit tests have passed. So that means even if you're changing a style in your SAS file, all the tests have to run and they all have to pass. So that's been useful.
Let's go Tong and then Valerie.
How is your current job informed your thinking around where you want to get next?
So the question is, how has your current job informed your thinking about your next job?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually not currently thinking about a next job, so I'm not really sure. I mean, one of the things I really like about what I'm doing right now is how the breadth and the depth of what I'm working on. So there's so many things that there are to continue learning right now that it's really satisfying. I mean, not only are we sort of solving problems and making connections with different developers around the world, but internally there's still more things to learn and kind of more problems to solve. And I don't know, I think that's more than looking for the next job. I'm looking for the next sort of like, what's the next learning challenge, or what's the next sort of thing that I should tackle that's going to make the developer experience even better.
Our company has a pretty good thing where we have a one-on-one with our manager every week, and it's not just to go over what you're supposed to be doing or anything like that. It's basically for career, to give you feedback on how you're doing, and then if there is something that you want to do, that would be the time to bring it up, to say, oh, I'm interested. I was working with analytics the other day. They're working on this project. What do you think about this? And to kind of get feedback if you want to go a certain direction, because they really want you to move up within the company instead of looking for somewhere else to go. So. I'll be looking inside first.
All right, Valerie?
I just wanted to ask about, like, what are your company's testing practices in terms of, like, continuous integration? What level do y'all test at? You mentioned unit tests, so I figured.
Oh, that's interesting. Like, how much testing is happening at these companies?
That's a great question. So at my company, we're kind of in a state of like in between. So we're trying to move more toward Agile principles, and Agile is obviously really big on unit testing and end-to-end testing, et cetera. But we're not quite there yet. We work in an environment where things are always changing. We'll get a request for a feature one day, and then a few days later, there might be like modifications that changes the whole way we made that feature. So when you're kind of working on a fast pace, sometimes you have team members that really push back against tests, because it does take a little bit longer They say it takes maybe 30% more time to like write the unit tests for your front end. But they also say that it's supposed to cut down your bugs reported by users by like 40 to 80%. So on the back end, it should save you a lot of time. So we're kind of trying to get everybody on board with that. We have 100% code coverage for unit testing on a couple of our projects. And then the rest of them have basically no code coverage, and we don't have any end-to-end tests yet. So we've got a long way to go. And we're hiring some new team members that are super on board. So we're hoping in the next couple of years we'll get to 100% code coverage.
During our code reviews, so every single push that you ever make, like they run a suite of tests, and during our code reviews, it actually will highlight any lines of code that wasn't run during the test, so you can see specifically like what wasn't tested, which is really nice because then you know, and then like most people are anal enough because it's like red, and you don't want it red, so it's pretty good. And you know, like when we break things, like the first thing that you do when they revert it is like you have to write a test specifically for what you broke. And so it's actually been really great because they do take longer to write, and you know, you're literally writing like pretty much twice as much code. But I think they're really helpful, just making sure that like the quality of the code is good.
Okay. Any other questions? We'll take 2 or 3 more questions. Let's go, Isaac and Kim. Okay, so the question is around, is there mentorship at the company, on the team?
My company doesn't have any formal mentorship yet. I've had great support from the people on my team, and I meet with my boss every 2 weeks, and he is also an engineer. So we, talk about some things, and he encourages me to like continue. We have lynda.com subscription, we have Code School, and anything else that we would want, we could probably ask for. But one thing I would encourage anybody to do who's interested in mentorship is sign up for a free mentorship on studentmentor.org. Before this, I worked at a company that did workforce development and jobs. And you can get a mentor in any field, and there's a lot of engineers on there who are happy to provide some of their expertise. And I wouldn't have even gotten into this field if I hadn't been on that site talking to people who were in this. So studentmentor.org.
When I was looking for jobs, one of the big things I was like focusing on was basically mentorship, just because of, like we're coming out of Fullstack, had very little experience in the industry already. So like our company does a really good job with that. Everyone's assigned a mentor, but then on top of that, we have a lot of one-on-ones with our managers, with like the team lead. So there's a lot of opportunity to kind of talk to people about your career growth and things that you want to learn about. So yeah, there's definitely like, I think that's like one of the most important things that, like when you're looking for jobs, is you definitely want some type of mentorship structure within the company, just because it allows everyone to grow in some way. So it's good.
All right, final question, Kim.
When you were applying for jobs, were you focused on size of company? And if so, what caused you to go down that path?
For me, actually, I ended up, it was my favorite code challenge that I did. So when I got, you get the different code challenges, it was definitely, they wanted full test, they wanted you to put it on Git, they wanted everything that, how I like to code. That's exactly the code challenge I got. So I thought that I would really like the job. And then once I met the people, it was great. So I think it was more about the work itself than the size of the company, because I applied to different things, but that's kind of similar.
Yeah, for me it was like 1,000% like the mission of the technology. I won't go into that story, but I will say that like I saw someone forwarded me a tweet in June or something like that, and that's kind of how this whole thing got started. But the tweet was basically something like, do you like helping developers and helping people get in touch with creative technology? And I was like, holy shit, that's like totally everything I want to do. And I responded to that tweet immediately. This was someone I'd already met once, and we were on the phone later that day. But I think the fact that it was a large company and that it was like a really cool company is, to me, perhaps less important than the actual mission itself. I just was really in love with that.
I'd say I didn't have the most room to be picky in terms of like sectors and stuff, but there were some things that I wouldn't compromise on. One of those was I talked to a company where I was interviewing with the CTO and the CEO, and they just did not have their shit together. They got in a debate in the middle of my interview about whether the healthcare was going to cover ambulance services. But I interviewed with another small company that I loved, and I could tell that they were great people, great to work with, and also interviewed with a couple large companies that I totally would have worked for, but ended up accepting this offer and it worked out well.
Again, mentorship. I think I was really focused on working with smart people and a good team. And you can find that at a large company to a small company. I think like in the beginning, actually, it was indicative. Like we all work, like no matter what size company you work at, like the specific team that you work with is going to be relatively small. And so figure out that team. Like that's way more important than other things. So yeah.
All right, well, thank you very much. That was really interesting, very helpful. If we give our panelists a round of applause. Thank you so much. And we'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll